You see, Marcus was a child who had a hard life in his short 3 years. His life was taken by the people who were supposed to love him and help him, all because they said he was hard to handle. Marcus himself was born on June the 24th, 2003 in Ohio. He was described as a very outgoing and loving child. He was taken out of his birth mother's home in 2006 after he was found wandering around on the busy streets. Marcus's birth mum, her name was Donna, was also reportedly in a bad relationship, and the home she owned was covered in bugs and feces. So because of all of this, Marcus was placed in foster care. He was sent to live with Liz and David Carroll, just outside of Cincinnati. Liz and David had 3 other children of their own, as well as a 1-year-old foster child. Liz said that Marcus struggled at first, but once all the other kids made him feel welcome, he loved it. Liz also ran a daycare from their home, and David helped out. David himself had issues holding down a job because he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and took medication for it. Now, David did move out for a while, but came back after Liz had begged him to do so. He wasn't alone though. He brought his girlfriend named Amy Baker. Yeah, let me tell you that again. You got Liz, David, husband and wife, and Amy, David's girlfriend, living in the house. What could go wrong? Liz said she was fine with Amy living there because she couldn't raise all the kids on her own. Liz, Amy, and David also had a 3-way relationship, which really shocked the family. Now, regarding the incident itself in which Marcus disappeared, Liz, Marcus, and a few of the other children went to the park in August 2006. Liz had fainted due to low blood pressure and the ambulance was called. David was also called so that he could come and take care of the kids. When David got there, he noticed that Marcus was missing. A 3-day search for Marcus was soon underway, with helicopters and search dogs. By the 3rd day, they had stopped searching because they didn't find any evidence. The park was also filled with people, and no witnesses remembered seeing Marcus that day. At the time, Liz stated to the media, "I need help from the public to help my son. Please, people think foster care is temporary, but I want him now. Please return him to a hospital." She said, "Waking up every morning and not having him run to me is very difficult. I am closer to him than his birth mother." However, the police did not buy Liz's statements and started to think something more sinister had happened to Marcus. So the police decided to interview Marcus's case workers. One of them confessed she actually hadn't seen Marcus since the year before. The police then conducted polygraph tests for David, Liz, and Amy. All of them failed. The police decided to make a deal with one of them to determine where Marcus was. So in 2006, Amy and Liz were told to report to court to testify before a grand jury. The police then decided to make their deal with Amy, and they would give her immunity as long as she didn't have anything to do with Marcus's death. Amy said that she, Liz, and David went to Kentucky between August the 4th and 6th to go see Liz's family. Liz had said she did not want Marcus there, so Liz and David wrapped Marcus in a blanket, put tape around him, and locked him in their closet. Liz herself also confessed in front of the grand jury. She said they left him there without food or water, but didn't have any intentions of hurting him. What? You sit there in court, you tell the jury, "I starved him, he was dehydrated, but I didn't mean to harm him." You silly cow. Now when they got back home on August the 6th, he had died. Authorities believe his life was taken by heat rather than dehydration or starvation, as temperatures in the closet may have reached 110 degrees. His remains were eventually found on August the 28th by police. He was found in a grass property in Ohio. So on Friday, April the 20th, 2007, the Commonwealth of Kentucky charged Amy Baker with evidence tampering. Prosecutors in Kentucky claimed that the immunity she was given was only with the state of Ohio, and Kentucky has jurisdiction over the Ohio River. She waived extradition and defended charges brought against her in Kentucky, which carried a maximum 5-year sentence. Her attorneys moved to dismiss all charges against her and to suppress all testimony given by her in the prosecutions of Liz and David, and alleged that the Kentucky prosecutor promised Ohio prosecutors that Amy would be given immunity in Kentucky as well. Her trial was set for November 2007, but her charges were then dropped in early 2008. Liz and David were indicted on 2 counts of child endangerment and 1 count of involuntary manslaughter. David was also indicated for 1 count of gross abuse of a corpse. They were also indicted for 1 count of making false alarms and inducing panic. Liz was charged with 2 counts of perjury. So Liz went to trial in February 2007. She was found guilty. She was sentenced to 54 years to life in prison. David accepted a plea deal and he was given a sentence of 15 years to life in prison. And on June the 24th, 2007, on what would have been Marcus's 4th birthday, a bench was dedicated to him in Georgetown, Ohio. The foster care agency that placed Marcus with Liz and David, they were called Lifeway for Youth, had their license revoked. Fair play. Deserved. Amy herself went to prison in 2009 for drug trafficking. She sold prescription pills to a police informant. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Finally, David was actually eligible for parole in 2022, but a parole board decided against his release. That was the right decision. I don't know why Liz was so ashamed of Marcus. She did not want her family to see him, but I'm glad she'll never get out of prison, and I'm glad David seems like he won't either. As for Amy, well, at least she did some time, but she should probably be in prison also. On October the 9th, 2007, Colorado Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to Calais Corvo Drive. It was regarding an unresponsive 2-year-old child who was lying in bed near a blood-stained table in the living room. After being transported to Memorial Hospital, Elise Vick was declared dead due to a fatal brain injury she sustained. She was under the care of Jules Cuneo in a foster home, as Elise's mother was arrested for drug charges and her father was serving a sentence for assault. Now, before I continue, the theme of this video is around foster parents and their treatment of children, so I'll have 2 more cases for you in this video after this one. Upon questioning Jules, it was revealed that she was using Elise's on her knees when she suddenly fell off her lap and landed her head on the coffee table. She also said that earlier in the day, she fell on her face in the Target parking lot and scraped her knee. After the coffee table incident, Jules took Elise into a shower in an attempt to revive her, which, as we know, was unsuccessful. Now, Dr. Paul Grab, the neurosurgeon who performed the autopsy of Elise, determined that there were no external injuries to her body that were consistent to the amount of trauma she suffered to the brain, further indicating that the fall wasn't severe enough to cause Elise's death as described by Jules. So somewhere, someone is lying. This key information was immediately picked up by the detectives who started interviewing Jules, where after confronting her for hours with the evidence, she revealed that after Elise fell onto the coffee table, she picked her up and deliberately did the same again a second time on the coffee table, which was hard enough that she landed on the floor, where she wasn't able to talk and never spoke again. This was all done because Jules was angry with Elise that she wouldn't talk to her. In other words, Jules took Elise's life because she felt rejected. What? However, this was not the first time Jules was caught upsetting the victim. You see, on August 5th, 2007, a letter was sent to the Department of Social Services, where the sender chose to be anonymous in the fear of what Jules would do to her family if she found out. The sender also attached the audio tapes of the way Jules treated the victim, Elise, by literally sitting on her and squeezing the entire body of the 2-year-old under her weight. The audio also recorded how Jules would teach her to say, "Get off me," "Elise is stupid," "Elise is chicken." And this behavior wasn't even done in private. As in the letter, the sender wrote at the end that sometimes the other kids in the house mimic Jules' behavior and treat Elise badly. So the conundrum here is that Jules said this was an accidental fall, but given the evidence from the letter and the audio, Jules gets satisfaction from sadism and humiliating the child. But it gets worse. Keep listening. To police, Jules also confessed about more injuries caused to Elise for several months, ranging from fractured front teeth to facial bruises and an injury to the frenulum. Now, from March to June in 2007, Jules described around 15 injuries caused to the child, whether it's a rug injury or a skinned knee. And it seems that Jules wasn't just a sadist, she even had attachment issues with Elise, as one time, while having dinner outside in a restaurant, Elise gave a hug to a stranger. And it's quite evident how much love she needed. She wasn't getting affection from her foster mother, so she just got it from a random stranger. That's quite telling. This enraged Jules to a point that she carried her to the home and then again. Now, to the police, Jules described her anger and unhappiness with the child after she returned home from her grandparents. That's when Elise started to throw tantrums before bed. She refused to eat her meals on time and was always angry with everyone around her. And on a side note, with anyone that has kids, one of the hardest things to do is to get them to eat, so this should not be surprising. In fact, what Jules told the police is that sometimes she would try to comfort her. If she didn't want to eat the food, she would say, "It's okay, we love you," and give her a hug. However, when the detectives spoke to Jules' biological daughters, they said Jules would complain about little things, like Elise being given candy or her hairstyle changed. And earlier, where I mentioned the grandparents, well, because Elise's biological parents were missing, she would often visit her grandparents. And her grandmother would notice the child's extreme behavior of not wanting to go back to the foster home with Jules, saying she doesn't want to go back to that house. Her grandmother, however, Miss Hale, would ignore that and tell her everything's gonna be okay. In fact, to police, Miss Hale described all the injuries the poor girl had sustained, and these weren't present before she ever got to her house. Elise would tell her grandmother, "Mummy had did this," as in Jules. Miss Hale was first hesitant about complaining as they didn't want to blow their chances of being able to meet Elise in the future, but that did not stop them from complaining about this incident to the social services. Miss Hale did speak to them and they said they would look into it. But when Elise's situation did not approve, Miss Hale would complain again, with all the evidence she had, but she'd be told again, "Don't worry, we're gonna look at it," by child services. You could argue that the grandmother at this point should have called 911 or the police, but I don't really fault her. I mean, she did go to social services. What else could she really do? By this point, Elise was so traumatized that even the loud sound of a car door slamming would fill her with fear. Now, in these interviews the police conducted, when the detectives listened to the audio tape of Elise crying, the voices of pain would be described as atrocious and horrific. Jules would even complain about her grandparents so that she can put an end to their visitations and probably continue her sadistic moments without getting caught. Elise was even forced to say that she loves living with Jules or else she'd be abandoned outside. Now, even to this day, it's still unknown what made Jules literally take the girl's life, even though she mentioned Elise not talking to her, which angered her. To a point, she did this to her on the table. But she herself was a single mother of 2 daughters. It's safe to assume that her children would have thrown tantrums when they were young. I mean, what was particular about Elise that triggered her sadism to commit such heinous acts and even made others do the same to Elise? Elise's grandfather described her as a beautiful little girl who enjoyed life even through the situation with foster care. To the grandparents, the last time Elise was seen alive was September 2007 in a wedding where her injuries weren't visible due to a dress, but she did appear visibly thin. This was 10 days before she died. And it was in 2010 When things could not get worse about Jules, there were letters of Jules that the daughters were reading in court. They told the court that their mother had put Tabasco and vinegar in their eyes and on their tongues and stung their cheeks with metal tongs. What? They even said their mother sat on all the kids until some of them passed out. Wow. So from a table coffee incident to Tabasco and vinegar in the girls' eyes, it suggests to me all the girls were tortured. Maybe the coffee table incident was what finally took Elise's life, but given the description of what Jules did to these girls, Elise was about to die at some point anyway, it seemed. That's just brutal. Tabasco in the eyes? What? That is a specific kind of pain. If I was to put Tabasco in your eyes, it's not like you can be like, okay, I can let the pain go away. You're going to scream. It's that kind of intense pain. In fact, during the trial, Ashley Lindenberg, who was Elise's biological mother, was crying out, saying, "Are you kidding me?" But when she found out that Jules was only sentenced for 32 years, Ashley probably regretted allowing her daughter to be taken into foster care. The judge called it as the cruelest case he has ever heard in his 38 years of practice. El Paso County was also sued for the death of Elise, as how all the social workers ignored the signs and reports of her abuse by Jules. So Jules had a foster child she did not want. She was obviously pissed off in her life because she was single, had these kids she had to deal with, had to go to work and do it all by herself. So she took out her anger on this poor child. There's many cases I've covered, right? More of which are about to come, where the child services have let the children down. But sometimes the adult in the equation, well, you've got to take full responsibility. 32 years, what a lot of bollocks. Now I'm going to move on to my final case of Jennifer Rosenbaum. So on November the 17th, 2015, Layla Daniel, a 2-year-old foster child, died while in the care of Jennifer and Joseph Rosenbaum. They were arrested and subsequently charged in a 49-count indictment for Layla's death. They were also charged for the alleged physical treatment of Millie, their second foster child and Layla's biological sister. But I'm going to start with the background of Layla. See, Layla needed a good home. She had lived with her biological mother, who had spent months in jail, her father even longer. The disruption seemed to take a toll on the child. Sometimes she could let out, sometimes she would scream. Her troubles began well before she met Jennifer. This was when she was living with her mother, Tessa. Now the DFCS, or Child Services, their caseworkers responded to a handful of complaints about the care and supervision of Layla and her older sister, but they didn't always get in the door. After the agency opened one case in early 2014, Tessa moved to North Carolina. She did not leave a forwarding address, so the Child Services closed the case. After another complaint, the caseworker said no one in the home would answer the door. Tessa yelled at the caseworker over the phone, so they decided to close the case. In January of 2015, Tessa was arrested on a charge of conspiracy to distribute meth. The county sheriff's office said it had been listening to a wiretapped cell phone of a drug dealer when Tessa called the phone. She spent 3 months in jail before being released. So because of this, the Child Services took Layla and her sister into state custody. They became foster children. And in many ways, Layla was like every other kid. She enjoyed hot dogs and chicken nuggets. She loved playing with her toys. But she started showing signs of aggression. She was afraid of sudden movements, and she hardly spoke at all. In fact, Tessa's mother, she was actually a former foster child herself. She acknowledged she had some problems, but insisted she was not a habitual drug user. Most of all, she said she loved her kids. She said, "They were the center of my world. They helped me make it through my day. They were always fed, clothed, and loved." So shortly after Layla and her sister entered foster care, they were at the Henry County Juvenile Court. This is when they were introduced to a law intern. The intern recognized their mother's name. She remembered that years ago, the two had spent time together at a foster children's shelter. This intern was Jennifer. So now let's look at her background. Layla moved in with Jennifer and Joseph on July the 24th, 2015. Child Services performed a home evaluation and ran criminal background checks on the couple. It seemed they were stable and reliable. They also appeared to greatly love children. The Rosenbaums loved the girls, several friends and family reported. Jennifer helped Layla learn numbers and letters. The Child Services recorded positive changes in Layla. They said Layla is doing well and has come a long way. She's able to count to 5 and recognize the amounts when counting on fingers. For Jennifer, this was a culmination of her dream to help foster children. That dream had its seeds in Jennifer's own time in Georgia's foster care system. Growing up in Henry County in the 90s, Jennifer's family was sometimes homeless. Sometimes they were living on the street, or in a tent, or out of a car at truck stops. The children in the family were sometimes assaulted, and Child Services removed them in 1997 and placed them in foster care. At the time, Jennifer was around 9. She had a smart mouth and sometimes fought with her sister, but Jennifer turned her life around and did not look back. Jennifer seemed nothing like the people who are typically charged in the death of a child. She isn't some drug-addicted mother guilty of neglecting her child, or the live-in boyfriend who lies out, or the father who traps his child in his own mental illness. She seemed like a very promising foster parent, caring, committed, involved in her community. It seems she fooled everyone. So now let's look at the incident itself on what happened. See, Jennifer seemed infused with positive energy and ambition when she took the child in. She was a candidate for the Henry County Commission, Emory Law student, and intern at the state legislature and local juvenile court. 4 months after Layla's move into the house, the toddler was dead. Jennifer had been charged with murder and child cruelty, though her lawyer asserted the child's death was likely a tragic accident. In the trial, the prosecutors found that the Child Services missed red flags that might have saved the child's life. Out of nowhere, the child experienced a broken leg, but there was no investigation. In October of 2014, there were text messages sent to Child Services saying Layla had broken her leg at a gymnastics center. In the text, Jennifer said she's doing okay. She's laughing, playing, singing, and hasn't cried once, not even when it happened. The caseworker did not investigate the broken leg any further, which violated policy. You see, whenever a foster child suffers a serious injury, the caseworker must file a report that begins an investigation into the cause. So, on November 17, 2015, this was Jennifer's birthday. It was also Layla's last day on Earth. Jennifer and her husband Joseph, who was a corrections officer, planned to celebrate with the girls. The couple had already begun buying Christmas gifts for them. When Jennifer called 911, she told the dispatcher that Layla was choking on some chicken. She said the blockage was out, but the little girl's breathing was slow, and her eyes were rolled back into her head. She said, "I'm trying to do CPR, but she keeps going white on me. I'm hoping I didn't break her rib. I've been pushing hard. I don't really know how to do this." So after several minutes, ambulance arrived. Eventually, Jennifer and Joseph were arrested on December 4th. Jennifer's arrest warrant said that she is the one that took Layla's life by her abdomen with such force the child's pancreas was transected. What? The child was believed to have entered shock due to the blood loss resulting from the injury. The warrant noted that Layla was injured about her body in its entirety. The autopsy report certified the manner of Layla's death as homicide. There was a liver laceration, a laceration to the pancreas. The laceration of the pancreas actually separated into 2 pieces. The medical examiner said the description of Layla's death indicates a terminal seizure. She mentioned Jennifer saying Layla was shaking and at one point the toddler eyes rolled into the back of her head. She told the court she found no food or food particles in Layla's esophagus. This would have indicated choking, as she mentioned to the operator. The medical examiner said there would have been food debris if the child was choking. There was evidence Layla had an old injury to her liver, perhaps 1 to 3 weeks old, that went untreated. Jennifer's attorney said the couple never did this to the girl. She said Layla died after Jennifer performed the Heimlich maneuver and CPR when the child was choking on a chicken tender. The force of the compressions may have caused the injury to the pancreas. Now, the defense attorney attributed the child's other injuries to what may have been incidents that occurred before her stay with the Rosenbaum family. After Layla's death, Child Services reviewed its handling of the entire case. Agency investigators looked into the girl's broken leg, plus they went to the gymnastics location where this apparently happened. But when they went there, the staff told them, Layla doesn't come here. She's not enrolled here. In fact, her sister did go, but Layla did not. Then child welfare experts who reviewed Layla's history said they spotted troubling signs in the way Child Services handled the case. Time and time again, the Child Services tried to bend over backwards to help Jennifer, who was connected with the Corps and the community. Several experts pointed to an incident that occurred just before Layla entered the home. The girls had been staying with another foster mother, her name was Patricia, but occasionally visited the Rosenbaum's family. Patricia noticed Layla return with some of those visits with injuries. Lambert took Layla to the Henry County Child Services office to show them, but no investigation was opened. Months later, after Layla's death, investigators questioned the case worker and supervisor about their response to the concerns. So after their arrest, Jennifer walked around her home with an ankle monitor. This was a condition of her bond. She could not leave the state. Her husband was charged with child cruelty. He was also out on bond. In fact, at the time, a Facebook page that announced Jennifer's candidacy for the Henry County Commission had been taken down. In the trial, Layla's sister Millie also took the stand and gave unsettling testimony about how Jennifer would treat the girls and discipline them with objects. Jennifer was eventually sentenced to life plus 40 years. Joseph was sentenced to 50 years in prison, with 20 of those on parole. As for Tessa, Layla's biological mother, she said she's not doing any drugs. She has given birth to another child who looks like Layla. Layla herself was buried in Berea Cemetery, a small burial ground. The Child Services paid for the burial. There's no way to try and rationalize the behavior of all the individuals in these three cases. And there's many times where you and me have looked at the Child Services and ridiculed them, rightly so, for not doing enough. It's their job to do more. But what on earth are these adults playing at? Why would you do this? Jules, I know you're pissed off, but the girl did not deserve to be treated that way. No child is. As for that gruesome threesome, Liz, David, and Amy, Muppets. But the case of Jennifer is the most peculiar one. She literally had no reason to treat the child the way she did. There's actually no reasoning behind it. Maybe she's the worst of the lot. She had everything, and she threw it all away. For what? Anyway, comment, tell me what you think.